On July 1969, mankind achieved something that had never been done before. Against all odds, humanity took its first step beyond the Earth. The moon landing changed our planet forever and proved that there was no dream too far to reach. But what if I told you this mission almost didn't happen? The Apollo 11 crew put their lives on the line to make Neil Armstrong's famous quote a reality. But how did NASA get over the countless obstacles that stood in their way? Let's find out. The story began in the late 1950s when the Soviet Union successfully launched Sputnik 1, the first artificial satellite to orbit the Earth. This achievement kicked off the space race between the U.S. and the USSR. President John F. Kennedy declared that America would land astronauts on the moon by the end of the decade and bring them back safely to Earth. This goal inspired hundreds of thousands of people to enter NASA's astronaut training program. After rigorous physical and psychological testing, 14 candidates were selected for further training. Among them were 3 men who would eventually become household names: Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. In May 1961, Alan Shepard became the first American to travel into space. He was also the first astronaut to fly solo. In February 1962, John Glenn became the first American to orbit the Earth. These achievements brought the U.S. one step closer to the goal of landing on the moon. But many obstacles still had to be overcome. By 1963, the United States had sent several more spacecraft into orbit around the Earth, and had begun launching test flights for the Saturn V rocket, which would be used to send the Apollo missions to the moon. Meanwhile, the Soviets were making their own progress. In 1965, they successfully landed the Luna 9 spacecraft on the moon. But despite these successes, neither country had yet been able to land astronauts on the moon. In 1967, tragedy struck the Apollo program when a fire broke out during a test of the Apollo 1 spacecraft. The 3 astronauts aboard, Gus Grissom, John Young, and Roger Chaffee, lost their lives. A subsequent investigation revealed that the fire had been caused by a faulty electrical wire. Despite this setback, NASA pressed on with the program. The Apollo 4, 5, and 6 missions successfully tested the Saturn V rocket and the Apollo spacecraft. And on April 1969, Apollo 7 successfully orbited the moon. This mission paved the way for the Apollo 8 crew to become the first humans to orbit the moon and return safely to Earth. Now it was time for the next step: landing astronauts on the moon. On July, the Apollo 11 mission was launched from Cape Canaveral, Florida. The spacecraft consisted of 3 parts: the command module, the service module, and the lunar module. The command module was where the astronauts would live and work during the flight. The service module provided propulsion and electrical power, and the lunar module was designed specifically for landing on the moon. The 3 astronauts were Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. Armstrong and Aldrin were to land on the moon while Collins piloted the command module in lunar orbit. As the journey to the moon began, the world watched with bated breath as the powerful Saturn V rocket carrying the Apollo 11 spacecraft lifted off from the launch pad at Cape Canaveral. It was the most powerful rocket ever created, standing 363 feet tall, taller than the Statue of Liberty. Its engines generated 35,000 pounds of thrust, enough to make the rocket accelerate faster than the force of gravity. It took just 4 minutes for the spacecraft to reach orbital velocity and detach the spent booster rockets. Meanwhile, millions of people around the globe gathered around their televisions to watch the historic event unfold. As the rocket disappeared into the blackness of space, the only sounds that could be heard were the crackle of the radio and the murmur of awestruck spectators. Back at the control room, the team worked tirelessly to ensure the mission's success. Every beep and boop of the spacecraft was monitored closely by the flight controllers who made split-second decisions that could mean the difference between life and death. After a few days in orbit, the lunar module was detached from the command module and began its descent towards the surface of the moon. Armstrong and Aldrin had been given the go-ahead to land wherever they wanted, but as they approached the lunar surface, they noticed that the site they had chosen was covered in boulders. With only seconds to spare, Armstrong took manual control of the spacecraft and set it down gently on a patch of smooth, powdery ground. As the lunar module touched down, the world held its breath. Could this really be happening? Had humans truly reached the moon? When the dust settled, the answer was clear. They had. The Eagle had landed. For a moment there was silence as the world absorbed the magnitude of what had just happened. Then cheers erupted as it dawned on everyone that they were witnessing history in the making. At 10:56 p.m. Eastern Time on July 20th, 1969, Neil Armstrong became the first human being to set foot on the moon. He stepped out onto the dusty surface and planted the American flag proudly beside him. Looking up at the vast expanse of space, he uttered the famous words, "That's one small step for man. One giant leap for mankind." Armstrong and Aldrin spent 2 hours outside the lunar module, exploring the surface of the moon and collecting rock samples. They also planted a plaque that read, "We came in peace for all mankind." Before leaving, Armstrong placed a miniature American flag on the lunar surface to symbolize their mission's peaceful intent. Meanwhile, Michael Collins piloted the command module in lunar orbit, anxiously waiting for his crewmates' return. As the astronauts prepared to leave the moon, they had one last task to complete: placing the lunar module's ascent stage into lunar orbit so that future crews could use it to return to the moon. With this final step complete, the 3 astronauts returned to Earth aboard the Apollo 11, splashing down safely in the Pacific Ocean on July 24, 1969. They were greeted by cheers and applause from the crowd of onlookers who had come to witness their return. The world had watched with bated breath as these 3 brave astronauts left their mark on the moon and returned safely to Earth. The successful completion of the Apollo 11 mission was a testament to human ingenuity and the relentless pursuit of exploration. It was a moment that had seemed impossible just years before, and now it was a reality. The moon landings had a profound impact on the world. It inspired generations of scientists, engineers, and dreamers to reach for the stars. It showed that with determination and hard work, anything is possible. As we look back on the legacy of the moon landings, let us remember the courage and determination of those who dared to dream of a world beyond our own. But the story doesn't end here. There were 6 more successful moon landings following Apollo 11. Apollo 12 landed near the Surveyor 3 spacecraft, which had landed on the moon in 1967. The astronauts were able to retrieve parts of the spacecraft and return them to Earth for analysis. Apollo 14 landed in the Fra Mauro Highlands, an area of the moon that had not been explored before. The astronauts spent 33 hours, 15 minutes, and 22 seconds on the surface, collecting 42 kilograms of lunar material. Apollo 15 landed in the Hadley Apennine region, which included the tallest mountain on the moon, Mons Huygens. The astronauts spent 2 days exploring the area and collecting samples. Apollo 16 landed in the Descartes Highlands, an area known for its colorful rocks and soil. The astronauts spent 3 days on the surface, exploring the area and collecting samples. Apollo 17 was the final mission to land astronauts on the moon. The crew spent 3 days exploring the Taurus-Littrow Valley, including a lunar mountain called Shorty. One of the astronauts, Harrison Schmitt, became the last person to walk on the moon. These missions led to many scientific discoveries about the moon and helped us learn more about its composition, history, and evolution. They also inspired generations of scientists, engineers, and dreamers to reach for the stars and explore the unknown. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were many challenges and setbacks along the way. The Apollo program was a massive undertaking that required the combined efforts of thousands of people. It pushed the limits of technology and human endurance, and it wasn't without its risks. There were many close calls and accidents along the way, but the astronauts and ground crew never gave up. Despite all the challenges, the Apollo program was a resounding success. The astronauts who landed on the moon returned with valuable samples and data that helped us learn more about our universe. The program also inspired generations of scientists, engineers, and dreamers to reach for the stars. Today, the Apollo program is remembered as one of the greatest achievements of the 20th century. The images of astronauts walking on the moon are some of the most iconic of all time, and the program's legacy continues to inspire us today. We have learned that with determination and hard work, anything is possible. The Apollo program was a true testament to the power of the human spirit and the relentless pursuit of knowledge and exploration. It showed that we are capable of achieving the impossible and that we should never give up on our dreams.